Okay, so in this video we're going to take a first look at what's called subtractive synthesis. Now, subtractive synthesis is one of the most common forms of synthesis, and it starts with a frequency-rich sound, an oscillator, if you like, that has lots and lots of frequencies in it, which you then subtract away from to create the sound that you want. A good analogy for a subtractive synthesis is actually the human voice, where you have the air coming up through your vocal cords, being the oscillator, and then you filter the sound and you subtract away the elements of the sound you don't want with your mouth and tongue. And that's a very similar kind of idea to a subtractive synthesizer. Okay, so at the moment what you can see on the screen is the ES2, which is one of the synthesizers you can get out of Logic Pro. And you can see here I've put a frequency analyzer next to the synthesizer, which will show the frequencies from bass to treble. And then below is an oscilloscope, and this is used to track the waveform, so we can see what waveform is created by the synthesizer as it happens. So let's start. So the first element of a subtractive synthesis is the oscillator. At the moment we have one oscillator open here, and I have assigned it a sine wave. A sine wave is a very pure sound. If you want to have a listen to it, you can see. And there you go, that's a sine wave. And you can see it hasn't got much harmonics or anything. It's a very pure sound. It sounds like a flute. So high up it would sound very kind of pure, a bit like an electric piano, a bit like a flute. And then down below is a very sub-bassy sort of kind of thing, which you'd use for, say, drum and bass, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's your sine wave. Now you've got different waves as well, so if we carry on going through, or just miss that one for the moment, we have what's known as a square wave. Now this has lots of harmonics in it, and you can see it looks like a square wave. I'll stop that for a minute. And you can see we have the fundamental here, and then we have the harmonics going up like that. So this sounds a bit like a distorted guitar, would be a very kind of close approximation. Very distorted, very buzzy. And then next you have a triangle wave, which you can see is kind of halfway between a sine wave and a square wave. It's got a kind of buzziness to it, but it's a little less harsh than the square wave. And then we go down. Here we have a ramp wave. Now you can see this is a bit closer to a sine wave, but still kind of almost squaring off a little bit at the tops to add the distortion. And you can really clearly see the harmonics here. If I move up, see all the harmonics move as well. So that's quite clear there. And then another one is a pulse wave, which is basically like a square wave, except that it's not symmetrical. So you can see if you look here, the plus side is smaller than the negative side. But you can still see all the harmonics here, a lot of high-end busyness here. So those are the oscillators. Now, you can do all kinds of things with the oscillators. We can pitch them, so we can pitch them up an octave with this little button here. So that's an octave higher or an octave lower, down 12. So that's your starting point. Let's just start that 0 here. Okay, so the next stage is the filter. Now, this is where we start subtracting elements of the sound that we don't want. All right, so let's move on to the filter then, and we can see here we're going to start with a low pass filter, and what that does is it passes low frequencies but cuts high frequencies. So let's just play a sound, and then we'll just lower the filter. You can see it's taking out top end, leaving you just with the low end. Okay, yeah. And there's another point, there's another parameter to this, which is resonance. Now the resonance will add a little peak in volume at the point of cutoff, at the cutoff point. Now let's just try that resonance. You can hear that kind of sweeping peak peaky sound. So yeah, that's a low pass filter, and then you've got a high pass filter, which is like a low pass in reverse. It passes the high frequencies and cuts the low. So there you go, like that. Yeah, okay, you take that with the resonance down, you can hear the difference. It's not as intense. And then you have a peak filter, which is like the point at the cutoff point. There'll be a boost in sound. So it adds movement, but it still keeps the whole frequency there. Band release, that's band reduction, that's like a notch filter, so that's taking away at the cutoff point. Quite subtle. Put a bit of the resonance up for that. You can see it moving a little bit there. And then band pass, which is like it cuts the low and the high around the cutoff point. So those are your filters that you've got. Let's put it back to low. There we go. So the next thing to think about is the envelope. Now an envelope will shape the sound using an ADSR setup. Now the ADSR stands for attack, decay, sustain, release. At the moment this has got quite a fast attack. If I turn that up and then we play the sound, you can hear what it does. It takes time for it to come in. Okay, so that's what the attack phase does. And then we'll miss out decay for the moment. Sustain is the level that the sound will be when you keep the key pressed down. So if I turn this down, you can see what I mean. There you go, it drops down to the sustain level. So the sustain level could be top. So the amount of time that it takes to drop from the end of the attack phase to the sustain phase is determined by the decay setting. So the longer the decay setting, the longer it's going to take from getting from the top of the attack phase to the sustain phase. So let's turn that up, turn the sustain down, and make the attack a bit slow, a bit faster. You see it's dying away slowly. Or I could do it quickly. Put that down lower. Put that. There you go, you can see that, hear that. Okay, don't worry about this time one. Now the next one is release. So that's the amount of time it takes for the sound to die away after you've released the key. So if we turn that up, and I take my finger off the key, it dies away. And that's how you shape the sound with the ADSR envelope. Now you can use these envelopes to also shape other elements of the sound, such as the filter. So you can have the filter changing over time as well. But that's a little bit more complicated than we need to be right now. Suffice to say is you've got these three main elements. You've got the oscillator, you have the filter, and you have the envelope. Those are the three main components. There is another component that we should look at, which is the LFO, or low frequency oscillator, and this is used to modulate some kind of parameter of the synth. For example, pitch. That's where you mostly hear it. So on your modulation wheel, if you turn up the modulation wheel, what you're doing, you're increasing the low frequency oscillator's effect on pitch. So let's have a listen. Okay, see, I've just turned it up, and if I can increase it, so very powerful control. Okay, so yeah, that's an LFOs. Right, so that's the basics of this synthesizer. Okay, so what I want you to do now is get the ES2 up from the synthesizer list, like so, and then go to the factory preset, go to tutorial settings, analog saw init, and this will just make it one oscillator here, which you can have a player with. And you can see it's just in this top corner here of this triangle, so it's just this one oscillator. If you want to turn on the new oscillators, you can turn them on like this, and you can start blending them together. Have a go at that. Have a go at pitching them, seeing what you get with various different sounds with that. Have a go at Filtering, watch out for this blend feature. At the moment you can see it's set to the right, but set it to the left. This filter seems to be better. And then have a play with the ADSR envelope. And yeah, and if you want, have a look at the LFO, but we'll look to that in a bit more detail. Obviously there's much more to it than that, but we just got to start somewhere. So the next task, we're going to have a look at recreating a sound from a very classic hard house record from the early 2000s called Zombie Nation by Kernkraft 400, and we'll look at how to create these bass sounds, and that'll be in the next video.